So the Dalai Lama said this: if you want others to be happy, be compassionate. If you want to be happy, practice that same compassion. So it's all about that, right? The compassion, the love that we've been hearing about all morning. That's what it's all about. And so as I talk about compassionate listening, that really is the same thing as love, as respect. So the objective, actually, of compassionate listening is to deepen our understanding of someone else's perspective. Deepening that understanding of someone else's, maybe their suffering, how they're feeling in life. So we can build those bridges between those who may be different from us and those who we may not really have a very good understanding about. So as we practice that compassion and that compassionate listening, we can learn to get along with everyone. What a concept, right? Have any of you seen the documentary movie, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Is only one. Okay, you guys leave right now. You got to go see that movie. Wasn't it just fabulous, Jennifer?
I loved it.
I'll tell you, I want you to go see it. Take Kleenex, okay? Because I found myself just really emotional through that movie, and you'll understand why I won't tell you all about it. What I will tell you is this. Mr. Rogers is a beautiful, beautiful example of someone who exhibited and practiced that compassionate listening. Just with his whole heart, with his whole body, with his whole soul. His main focus, of course, was children. However, he was very influential also with adults. His gifts were that he heard what children were saying. He was in tune with what they did and what they did not say. He was so connected because he was so present. And that is the kind of compassionate listening that I'm talking about this morning. Just being there so deep and so intense with somebody that you feel what they're feeling. You feel who they are. Now, an essential part of being that compassionate listener, or with that conscious listener, is to know yourself, to know who you are, to know what your patterns and your habits are. We all have conditioned patterns of how we hear, how we listen to others. And when we recognize our patterns, our habits, we can understand how it may affect the listener or the person speaking. For instance, are there certain things that you don't want to hear? Or certain things you don't like to hear about or talk about or experience? Things you don't agree with? Do you shut down and stop listening when somebody is speaking, and do that maybe out of an old habit? Those are the kinds of things that we want to look at to get to know ourselves. A compassionate listener necessitates being completely present and being that connected one-to-one with whomever you're with at that particular moment. Listening without judgment, without interrupting somebody else's thought process or their speaking, and listening with your entire body like Mr. Rogers does, listening with your soul, and paying just as much attention to what's not being said. It's important to keep our focus on that one who's speaking and not indulge in that urge that human beings have to relate our own stories about similar incidents or situations, and offering that generally unsolicited advice or solution to problems, because so many times people just want to be heard. And if they're looking for a solution, in the process of sharing, very likely they'll come up with their own solution. We don't need to do that for them. We don't know somebody else's truth, somebody else's path or journey. The idea is not about sharing what I know. It's about helping others to get a deeper understanding of what they know. Does that make sense? So this process requires us to share and listen from that open heart, which in turn allows others as well as ourselves to open up to new thoughts, to open up to new ideas, sometimes even shifting our opinions as we learn to listen. Compassionate listening is about being that loving, unconditional presence in somebody's life. It's our life's work to practice being present, to learn how to see others from their own perspectives, from their own stories, not from ours. Because ours are conditioned from our own life experiences, from our own perceptions and our own judgments. And with open-mindedness, we can grow and get a deeper understanding of not just the other person, we can get a deeper understanding of life itself. This act of compassionate listening is essential to living an authentic life. And I know we're all on this spiritual journey. And I know that that's what we're gearing toward, right? Is living that authentic life, living from the essence of who we truly are. And this practice allows us to open our heart unconditionally and just be who we are. Those hands and feet of God expressing His love in this world. Now, on a global perspective, opinion, there certainly isn't enough conscious and compassionate listening. And the truth is, if we're unable to practice this on a personal level, then we ought not expect it out there on a global level, right? It always begins here. Always, always, always. So if we're seeing it out there, that means we got a little bit of that still going on in here. Now, many of our world leaders are very attached to the way they see the world, and they simply won't see it from a different perspective. They're not open to that. However, when we see that, we have to look at ourselves. Do we behave the same way in our personal life and expect something different out there? Invitation to look at that, because we must be the change that we want to see. Isn't that the truth? I believe compassionate listening can be the foundation for change in our world on all levels, on a personal level, on a community level, on a global level. I think it's worth a try. We've tried everything else, right? Let's get everyone in one room and have that compassionate conversation, listening and speaking. The Tao calls compassionate listening with the heart so we can find the way. And the way being that power and that presence that animates everything in the world, everything in the universe. And this type of listening will embrace our own struggles as well as our neighbors' struggles. Deep compassionate listening is a vehicle we can use to awaken our heart's amazing capacity to hold all that is human, to embrace humanity, to express that divinity, even holding what we previously may have considered incomprehensible. Being able to hold that still in a place of love. An incredible appreciation will emerge for others when we feel and fully comprehend our connection to all things. Not one thing, not the things we like. We don't get to pick and choose. We are connected to all things. We cannot be unconditional love without first being able to listen and to understand each other. That is just a simple, basic fact. Compassionate listening is also something that the Sufis do. They contend that if you, I love this, they contend that if you listen with your head, the words will only go as far as your ears. If you listen with love, the words go right to your heart. Isn't that beautiful? And there's a lot of truth to that. And at the heart of Sufism is the science of purifying the heart, attaching that to the remembrance of God, so that all of a person's actions are filled with sincerity, with authenticity. Their tradition fully comprehends that listening from the heart opens a door that transcends the mind. So the guidelines of compassionate listening are very simple. However, it requires the letting go of our habitual patterns of communication. Habits we likely learned when we were very young and have held on to, just because they're there, just because we've always done it that way. Now, and we hold on to those even though, and this I find very interesting, but really look at this, even though in many instances those habitual patterns and habits that we have tend to generate some fear. They tend to generate feelings of separation. And yet we still hold on to them as humans. We're such creatures of habit that it can be challenging. It can be challenging first to even see that we have these old habits and patterns, and then second, be willing to make the shift and do something different. So, when we're ready, we make the effort to relearn some skills. Relearning to live from our heart, from our authentic self, instead of from those old habits and patterns that we're holding on to unconsciously. Letting go of that old truth that no longer serves us. We constantly have new truths with a small t that come into our life, sometimes daily, weekly, whatever. And those are revealed to us. And we get to decipher and choose which one of those works for us today, right now. And maybe tomorrow it won't work for us. But today, right now, it works. And this is the something to really look at, because having tunnel vision, relying on one way of thinking or one way of being without being open to something new, is not conducive to our spiritual growth. So it's about being flexible. It's about change. It's about being open to whatever's next. I believed this today, but tomorrow I could shift over here, and that's okay. The truth with that small t that we've come to believe and rely on is not necessarily the ultimate truth. Not one of us in this room have the corner on that. It's true for us in the moment, and it will exist for us until a greater truth is revealed to us or we come to find. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that we abandon our truths and abandon our beliefs, only that we open our heart to new truths that we can discover through other people, other religions, and other parts of the world. I think that's so important. Inherently, we each and all possess the divine truth. We all do. We see it differently. We experience life differently. That doesn't take away from the fact that we all have that. When we share our truth with one another and use compassionate listening, we begin that process of bringing the parts of the whole together. It helps us reduce that idea of separation, letting go of any fear. Peace will come about when we listen and share everyone's truth, without judgment, without criticism. See the world through somebody else's eyes. Be open to that experience. If we don't have conversations with people who are unlike us, and we don't ask questions, how will we ever learn? How can we ever expand our awareness, expand our spirituality, be our authentic selves without having somebody else's information to bring into our own? Martin Lowenthal said this: compassion is a foundation for sharing our aliveness and building a more humane world. I have to agree with that. If all we have is compassion for everybody and everything, what could be wrong? What could go bad? Not a thing. It's all about that love and that compassion. So listening with that compassionate heart is key to our spiritual growth. And I'm not talking about listening with the human ear, like the Sufis talk about. Listening with our spiritual ears, the one inside, which is very different from deciding in advance what is right and what is wrong when you're having a conversation with somebody, seeking our own agenda. We literally must suspend our belief and really be present to listen, to hear what someone else has to share. I mean, who knows? Who knows? What we hear may just expand our knowledge, may just expand our spiritual growth, and even our sense of truth. It could happen. It could happen. Through non-judgmental listening, we can help to awaken to our oneness with both the strange and the familiar. Learning that God resides in all of it. All of it. Gandhi reminded us that there exists within each person a power and energy equal to the force of an atom bomb. A loving power, a caring power, a healing power for peace. It's time for us to release that power in any way we can. However we can, however that shows up for us personally. Thich Nhat Hanh did that just several years ago. He created an organization called the Buddhist Order of Interbeing. It's a core community of everyday men and women who have taken a vow to observe his 14 mindfulness trainings that are part of this order. They practice this way of life for a full year, and after that, that person can be ordained and then organize a community to surround them and to be with them in order to continue the practice. And the 8th mindfulness training relates directly to what I'm talking about this morning, and that is, it says that the lack of communication always brings separation and suffering. Haven't you found that to be the absolute truth in your life? So they vow to be committed to training themselves in the practice of compassionate listening. The order also vows to learn to listen deeply, without judging, without reacting, and to refrain from uttering words that can create discord or cause the community to break. In other words, what your mother said was right. If you don't have anything nice to say, right, then don't say anything at all. They commit to making every effort to keep that communication open and to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small they appear to be. Isn't that beautiful? No misunderstanding, no arguments. What a beautiful little world to live in, yes? We can do that too, and we can do it through that compassionate listening. Although there are minimal rules for compassionate listening, it can be a challenging practice to master. I know, don't you love that? He's listening to you. The key to this compassionate listening is to set aside the urge to respond, to blame, to interrupt, to let the speaker just speak their words. And not only listen and hear what they're saying as much as what they're not saying. Just like Mr. Rogers. Now, I know you think that's a goofy reference, but when you see the movie, you'll get it. Right, Jennifer? I mean, just really powerful. It's said that most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. We want to move away from that. Post haste, by the way. If you've ever been on the other side of that, it's frustrating and you don't feel respected. You don't feel loved. You don't feel cared about or heard. So instead, let's practice this. Listen to hear. Really hear what's being said. Listen to understand and listen to learn. Listen without comment, even if you don't agree with what's being said. Even if you have that perfect solution. Listen with complete focus on what the person is saying or not saying. And listen with respect. No matter whether the person is on your side or the other side. Doesn't matter. Be open. Keep that heart open. And learn to discover through these conversations the connection between the two of you. Listen with empathy. With compassion. Most importantly, always listen with and from your heart. Thank you so much for being here this morning while I shared this truth as I understand it.